Alexander the Great, one of the most extraordinary and enigmatic warriors of all time. At the age of 30, he was ruler of one of the largest empires ever known. From the olive groves of Greece to the dusty palaces of India, Alexander brought East and West together and forever changed the ancient world.
He's a wise man, he's a murderer, he's a psychopath, he's a genius. Alexander is everything. He's all these things, and perhaps none of them as well.
Join us on a quest to find what drove Alexander to conquer distant lands. Was he a military genius or a bloodthirsty tyrant? His deeds are legendary. But in the end, did a power-crazed Alexander become his own most dangerous enemy? Babylon, June 323 BC. Alexander lies dangerously ill, his body racked with fever. After 20,000 miles of bloodshed and conquest, his pursuit of eternal glory is finally at an end. Alexander's men gather anxiously around his bedside. The historian Plutarch describes the scene. Nothing could keep them from seeing him a last time, and the motive at almost every heart was grief and a sort of helpless bewilderment at the thought of losing their king. Within hours, one of the world's greatest warrior kings would be dead. What led to his untimely death at 32? How was the conqueror finally conquered? To find some answers, we must retrace his remarkable story. Alexander was born here in Pella, in northern Greece, in 356 BC. The golden age of Greece had long passed. The empire was now a weak collection of torn and divided city-states. Easy prey for Alexander's father, Philip. King Philip was a rough, womanizing soldier. He was a heavy drinker, a fierce fighter, and the idol of his battle-scarred troops. His army was one of the best in the ancient world. But Philip was also a ruthless politician. He created the state of Macedonia by taming the region's unruly tribes.
To my mind, Philip's achievement was obviously overwhelming, the most underestimated man in antiquity who balanced the army, a military genius. Quite extraordinary.
With diplomacy and brute force, Philip went on to conquer most of Greece. From his father, Alexander learned military skill and leadership. But his mother, Olympias, also was a powerful influence. From her, he inherited his passionate and emotional nature.
Her influence on Alexander will have been immense. She was a powerful woman, very, one might almost say, mystical.
Olympias was a follower of religious cults, particularly the cult of Dionysus, the god of wine and passion. She is rumored to have worshipped the god by dancing with wild abandon and by falling into strange trances.
In a way, Olympias was just as impressive and intimidating as her husband. She was highly intelligent, politically astute, and tough as nails. She had a proprietary attitude towards her son, undoubtedly loved him very deeply, but was there as his sentinel, protecting his vested interests.
Olympias spread a rumor that she had been impregnated by Zeus, the king of the gods in the form of a snake. Throughout his life, Alexander would be fascinated by the thought he could be more than mortal. If his mother and father had a strong impact on the young boy, so did his teacher, the famous Greek philosopher Aristotle. Through him, Alexander learned the wonders of Greek culture, especially the great mythic tales. Aristotle inspired a love of Homer's Iliad, the story of the Trojan Wars. At its heart lie the heroes, whose epic strength and great deeds earn them power and fame. One of those heroes is Achilles, the archetypal Greek warrior. Offered the choice between a long, ordinary life or a brief burst of glory on the battlefield, Achilles chose an early death and eternal fame.
It would be very hard, I think, to underestimate the extent of Achilles' influence on Alexander. He was his ancestor, as he believed, mythically, on his mother's side. And from a very young age, I think, Alexander perceived that Achilles was the sort of role model that someone like him, who aimed always to be best and among the first, as Homer puts it, should take on. And I mean take on in two senses: assume the characteristics of, but also rival. So whatever Achilles could do, Alexander could do better.
Alexander left home to study with Aristotle for 3 years. When he returned at age 16, his other role model, his father, King Philip, had remarried. Worse, another son was born, threatening Alexander's position as successor to the throne. This made Alexander angry and resentful. The two quarreled violently.
This may well have embittered Alexander and started that very difficult atmosphere, which I actually think is cross-cultural, a universal psychological trait, if it comes into play, of deep rivalry of a son desperately wanting to outdo father.
The feud between father and son got so intense, Alexander went into exile. Ultimately, the two reconciled, but the truce did not last long. On a summer night in 336 BC, Philip and the royal family gathers to celebrate the marriage of his daughter. The king pauses at the entrance to greet the crowds. A man darts forward and inflicts a mortal blow. It's thought it was a jilted ex-lover. Like many Greeks of the time, Philip had both male and female partners. Philip died instantly. The murderer was killed on the spot before torture could reveal accomplices in high places. Did he act alone, or were there others conspiring along with him? Some historians believe the murder could have been arranged by Alexander's cunning mother, Olympias. After all, she'd been cast aside for a younger woman.
I would have thought that she's involved. I mean, heavens, this was what had displaced her from a position of honor. She's not going to just sit there quietly. Hell hath no fury, even in Macedonia, like a woman scorned.
And what about Alexander? Could he have had a role in his father's death?
In terms of for whom or for whose benefit was Philip's assassination most strongly pronounced, the answer must be Alexander, because Philip, at the time of his assassination, was about to go off to Asia, was about to begin this great campaign of conquest. Alexander wasn't even part of the story. He was going to be left behind, presumably as regent, but he was not going to be able to get the sort of glory that comes with being on this major campaign.
And glory was the one thing Alexander wanted above all else. Any suspicion would have angered the Macedonian nobles, whose support he needed and got. At just 20 years old, Alexander was made king. When he ascended the throne, Alexander inherited a great army, but much political unrest. It took him a year to quell a rebellion in Greece and solidify his rule. But Alexander wasn't content with Macedonia. His growing impatience and his ambition made him thirst for more. He set his sights on the Greeks' longtime enemy, the Persians. The Persian Empire stretched from modern-day Turkey to Pakistan. 150 years before, the Persians had burned the city of Athens and destroyed her temples. This war crime was never forgotten. Alexander's father, Philip, was planning to invade Persia before his death. Now Alexander would have his shot at revenge.
I would run with the line that Alexander's manic ambition is fueled as a response to his father's enormous success. He is a spark struck off Philip, and it's a very, very powerful, more than a spark, it's a devouring flame.
This devouring flame came close to consuming Alexander. Throughout his short life, Philip would haunt him, driving him to greater and greater feats in an effort to prove he was good enough, or perhaps even better than his father. With the ghost of Philip, Alexander sets out on the path of glory. In 334 BC, Alexander crosses the Hellespont with his army. He begins an 11-year journey of unparalleled conquest and ambition that would forever reshape the ancient world. His first stop, the fallen walls of Troy, to pay tribute to his childhood hero, Achilles. He and the man thought to be his lover, Hephaestion, visit the tomb of Achilles. Like the great mythic battle for Troy, Alexander is preparing for his own epic battle. His opponent? One of the richest and most powerful men on earth, King Darius III. The Persian monarch has no idea of the force he is up against. Alexander has been left a golden legacy by his father, one of the ancient world's best trained and most disciplined armies. Even more than Philip, the young king is a charismatic and inspiring leader.
I think the secret to Alexander's military genius is that he's extremely decisive, he's bold, and he seems fearless to the point of being reckless at times. That he never seems to hesitate to go dashing off into the action.